Greetings, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov. The Federal Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, emphasized in an interview with Süddeutsche Zeitung that he does not intend to meet with the President of Russia or have any contact with him because the only result of such contacts is new shelling of Ukrainian territory. Friedrich Merz cited as examples the visit of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban to the Russian capital, as well as the phone conversation with Putin by former German Federal Chancellor Olaf Scholz. And each time, Russia relentlessly struck critical Ukrainian infrastructure, destroyed important civilian buildings, and killed innocent people. Merz specifically reminded that every time the Russians targeted hospitals, and to this list of examples, I would also add the bombing of the Children's Hospital in Kyiv during the visit of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the Russian capital. We understand perfectly well why the Russian president is doing this. Firstly, he perceives any desire for dialogue or negotiation with him as a clear sign of weakness. And secondly, he wants to make foreign political leaders complicit in his crimes. This, by the way, is a very important part of Putin's overall tactics in his dealings with the new American president, Donald Trump. After all, it was precisely after Donald Trump returned to the White House that the number of shellings of Ukrainian territory, the destruction of residential neighborhoods, and the killings of Ukrainian civilians increased quite significantly. Putin hopes in this way to prevent Trump from being able to refuse further dialogue with him. Because in his view, the American president must be completely compromised by his contacts with the Russian leader during the killing of Ukrainian civilians. And of course, Friedrich Merz was asked how he feels about such contacts between Donald Trump and Putin, as well as about the assessments that Trump has repeatedly given the Russian president. As is well known, the President of the United States constantly tries to convince the world of his good relationship with Putin. Merz replied that the change in the American president's attitude toward his Russian counterpart is a process. And indeed, it should be noted that in recent weeks, Donald Trump's assessments of Putin's behavior have changed significantly. It seems the American president is beginning to realize just how difficult it will be for him to reach an agreement with the Russian president, even on a ceasefire on the Russian-Ukrainian front. It appears that Trump is realizing just how serious the reputational risks are for him in his relationship with Putin, especially against the backdrop of the American president's obvious domestic political defeats and the decline in his approval rating among the citizens of the United States itself. And Trump's attitude toward Putin is becoming yet another toxic problem for him, both from a reputational and a political standpoint. However, for the American president to truly realize this, it is necessary for his Western partners to constantly remind Trump of their willingness to rebuild relations with the United States, while at the same time making it clear that they have no intention of engaging with Vladimir Putin or any other representatives of the Russian political leadership themselves. From this point of view, Friedrich Merz's position does indeed appear to be more uncompromising than that of Olaf Scholz. The former German Federal Chancellor, as is well known, was one of the last Western political leaders to continue contacting Putin even after the start of the large-scale Russian aggression against Ukraine, and was the first among Western political leaders, if we do not count Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, of course, who, although only once, resumed contacts with Putin during the major war. Although it seems to me that the conversation between Scholz and Putin, which Friedrich Merz mentioned in his interview with Süddeutsche Zeitung, was more of a domestic political move than a foreign policy one. At that time, the German Social Democrats were actively fighting to maintain their significant role in the future government coalition. And through an ongoing conversation with the president of the Russian Federation, the former federal chancellor who was still trying to hold on to power when there were no real political grounds left for it wanted to win over the votes of those German voters who still, without reason, hope for the possibility of restoring the relations that once existed between the Federal Republic and Russia before the start of the large-scale war between Russia and Ukraine. First and foremost, of course, the energy relations which many in Europe can only dream about. But it is already absolutely clear that Russia, which has definitively left Europe for decades, will play no new role in the energy sector of the European continent, no matter how the Russian-Ukrainian war ends. Therefore, this contact by Olaf Scholz, when the Federal Chancellor of Germany spoke with the President of the Russian Federation, might have seemed like a certain breakthrough in Putin's diplomatic isolation. But now, when Friedrich Merz emphasizes that he does not intend to speak with the Russian leader, we see that in reality there has been no breakthrough in diplomatic isolation at all. And even Donald Trump, who initiated contacts with Putin and of course gave the Russian president the illusion that he could return to engagement with the West as a whole, was literally unable to do anything to get other Western leaders to join him. In fact, Donald Trump remains the only Western leader who is willing to engage in dialogue with Putin and advocates for the necessity of such dialogue in order to end the Russian-Ukrainian war. But even this completely illusory and irresponsible approach of Donald Trump and his administration to American foreign policy and contacts with the Russian Federation will soon be refuted by the very logic of life itself. And Donald Trump, regardless of his own wishes, will also have to abandon further contacts with the Russian president. Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel, subscribe to it, follow me on my social networks, and check out my contacts on Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and Donatello, which help support the development of these resources. Make use of the sponsorship feature right here on YouTube. Victory and peace. Good luck.